By listening to this podcast, you agree to not use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in yourself or others, including, but not limited to, patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Neuroendocrine Cancer Awareness Network be responsible for damages arising from use of this podcast. Welcome everybody to another episode of Nets Get Real by NCAN. I'm your host, Mike Wayman. And today we have another net expert, not necessarily a doctor, but you don't have to be a doctor to be a net expert. We have Tom Wilson. He's the leader of the Wisconsin Neuroendocrine Cancer Connection Group. He's a caretaker. He is a co-author of Negotiate Anything, Secrets to make businesses treat you fairly. And he and his wife are experts in negotiating with insurance companies because they often give denials and for coverage, and he fights it. So this is going to be a really, really good episode, really, really important topic. Before we jump into that, though, we got to remind you again, November 10th through the 12th, we're going to be doing the national conference. It's 3 years in the making. We were supposed to do it in 2020. We obviously had it planned earlier, and that got derailed. But Zebras Take Atlanta, hashtag Zebras Take ATL, taking place at the Marriott Marquis. We're going to have over 20 net experts on hand to share some presentations, to answer your questions. So registration is open. For more information, please go to netcancerawareness.org, and of course our social medias at netcanceraware. So now I want to welcome our guest today is Mr. Tom Wilson. Tom, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, very good. We got to talk a little bit before this, and it's really, really cool that you're presenting this subject. Because I feel like even I've never dealt with personally any of the neuroendocrine issues and stuff like that with insurance companies, but even just general insurance company issues, I find they just try to get out of paying whatever they can. And now you got neuroendocrine, and I'm sure it's a little bit better than it was years ago, but it's still relatively unknown, and I'm sure that they always question everything. So it's great to have an expert like yourself to help explain and tell everybody how to navigate these waters, because it's super important for sure.
Sure.
So just give us a little background about yourself, how you got into the net community. It's one of those things where the common thread tends to be I didn't choose Nets chose me. So yeah. I think that's a lot of what you're dealing with personally. So give us a little background about yourself and your journey.
For sure. First of all, I would say my wife is the one with Nets. She was diagnosed in 2015. I immediately went into Dr. Google and to try to find out as much as I could. And the good news is one of the first things that I came upon, so she was diagnosed in April of 2015. I saw that there was this patient conference for neuroendocrine tumors, something I had never heard about, nor I think everyone that gets diagnosed with this, they haven't heard about it. There was a conference within 60 days in Minneapolis, an NCAN meeting. And so we went there and we met with a lot of folks from Mayo Clinic, from New Orleans, and other clinics, Iowa as well. Yep. So what a wonderful introduction. And we've got a daughter in Minneapolis, so she was able to come. Our daughter that lives here close to us, we're just south of Green Bay, Wisconsin, who's a PA, physician assistant. She came with, so that was a good introduction. But my introduction into, how I became, and I won't use the word expert, but I know a fair amount about dealing with these insurance companies. I can tell you it wasn't by choice. Okay. My wife, Lynn, had two major surgeries at Mayo Clinic in Rochester in 2015 and 2016. She's a mid-gut with mets to the liver. And so those were her surgeries, as well as removal of the gallbladder. She's been on octreotide injections and Afinitor, otherwise known as everolimus, for a number of years now as well. And then a year ago, she was diagnosed with carcinoid heart disease, so she's been on Zermello. Now, what happened in I hate the word journey, but our journey was we had insurance, private insurance, because we had our own business. Mm-hmm. And then Obamacare hit, and so you had to shop from the list of companies. And so from the get-go, we had firms like Humana that covered Mayo in network. But what happened was insurance companies were leaving different states because they could no longer make money under the new rules of Obamacare. So we found that we could not buy coverage for Mayo Clinic in the state of Wisconsin. Wow. So I signed up with the best of the worst options, and I petitioned the CEO saying we need in-network coverage. Okay, so that's how we started. Now, they immediately denied that coverage. Now, if you think about it, cancer is one of the most expensive diseases to treat. And in the case of neuroendocrine, which tends to be indolent, not always, but very slow growing much of the time, the treatment can actually last for decades. Right. And the treatments are not inexpensive, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So if you think about it, neuroendocrine patients are not exactly the ideal patient for insurance companies. You don't hear them on TV saying, if you've got cancer, please come to Humana. You will never hear it. You will never hear that.
Sure.
I figure that Lynn's, and that's my wife, Lynn, her annual healthcare costs right now are running at about $450,000 a year. And this includes any surgeries. This is just, most of it, quite frankly, is drugs. It is the Afinitor, there's Zermello, and then the monthly octreotide injections. Thank God, and luckily, that's covered because we have traditional Medicare. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it is a well-known fact that insurance companies, they follow this principle called the 3Ds, which is immediately deny the claim, then delay it with tactics of filling out paperwork and, reviews and peer-to-peer telephone calls and so on and so forth. And then the third step in their process is defend. And that could be through grievance hearings, arbitration, and sometimes they will get lawyers involved.
Which to a patient, once you start getting arbitration and lawyers and things of that nature, that's a scare tactic. That's a major scare tactic.
It is.
And I'm sure 90% of the time, people just they okay, well, I can't cover that now. I'm trying to pay for my medicine. I'm not going to be able to pay for lawyer fees.
Or they'll give up. Now, usually there's not lawyers involved, but what they count on is they count on people giving up because you're already super stressed with this diagnosis of neuroendocrine. And, many people are working full time. They have children at home. And it just takes a huge amount of emotional energy. It takes knowledge. It takes expertise. I'm going to cover that in a little bit. But, let's step back here and look at the doctor-patient relationship. If you go back to, let's say, World War I, somebody got sick. They went to see their doctor. They went to the hospital. They paid cash. That was it. There essentially were no insurance companies.
Sure.
And you move along to World War II, and all of a sudden, the government puts on price and wage controls. because they were trying to tap inflation, much like we're going through today.
Yep.
And so employers could not raise wages, so they tried to offer something else, and the something else was health insurance. So that's really where it started, was during and after World War II. Many big corporations, like let's say IBM and so on and so forth, they were what's called self-insured. So the bills came in, they paid them. They might hire a firm to process the paperwork, but they were self-insured. But slowly but surely, insurance companies started to grow. They became bigger and bigger, and I'll say they weaseled their way into the doctor-patient relationship by then starting to require pre-approvals, right? And we'll call it second guessing the medical professionals, which amongst the old school doctors, the World War II doctors, I'm sure did not sit very well. And then if you think about the doctor-patient relationship, along 1995 becomes the internet. Consumers start having access to more and more information with Dr. Google, and they're coming in and sometimes questioning the doctor's choices. And so the doctor-patient relationship has had a fundamental change. But nevertheless, having a good doctor and a good relationship is paramount to success, I think.
Absolutely.
I would say the other thing is, in order for insurers to make money, they have to deny coverage. Not all coverage,
Right.
but they have to minimize the amount of coverages. Now, they would argue that no, we drive down costs by using big data, by using algorithms, by streamlining, by simplifying, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, the cost to run Medicare, and this is traditional Medicare, the overhead, the administration, the extra people to shuffle paper, is about 2%. Let me just look at my note. For private insurance, it's 12 to 18%. You drive down the boulevard, you see these big buildings, insurance companies with multi-level offices. They're all filled with people shuffling paperwork, issuing denials. Yeah.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Well, so what exactly, like, what's your story behind actually becoming? I mean, you don't like to use the word expert per se, but you're very well versed in this particular facet of a net patient's life, the insurance. So what specifically led you to becoming so well versed in insurance and denials and stuff like that?
Well, as I said, we got to a point in Wisconsin where we could not get insurance that included Mayo. So I got the best of the worst options. And I immediately, as soon as we started with the new insurance, sent a lengthy letter to the CEO. This is after reading, and I want to acknowledge Lori Todd, the insurance warrior,
Yep.
who has a book on this, and I think a business dealing with insurance denials. Well, she was my Bible, and I read that. I still have it here. I read it. I underlined it, pulled out paragraphs and statements. I learned a lot. In fact, I talked to her one or two times along the way as well. So I used that as background, and then I started building a case with our insurer to get them to authorize Mayo Clinic in network. And so I did my first attempt, and I was denied. Now, I was all green and I was a newbie. I had no idea how the whole process worked. And then I found out that, you can go to a grievance hearing. That's what they call it, a grievance hearing. So I'm like, well, what do you do at a grievance hearing? And so we went to the grievance hearing, and I've since learned that 9 times out of 10, it's almost an automatic denial. Well, you would think at a grievance hearing for something like this, there would be medical professionals involved. The fact is, we have been now to 3 grievance hearings with 2 different insurance companies, and each time there is about a dozen, I'll call them suits. These are mid-level managers that shuffle paper. In both cases, there was one nurse involved who had no experience with nets. So essentially what happens is you send any documentation in advance. You might have case studies, research on the subject to support your case. Why is it important to be seen at a NETS specialty center? I always prepare about a 5-minute talk. So when I'm in the room, I'm looking at each person's set of eyeballs because I'm trying to build empathy with them.
Yeah.
But they, in fact, are the ones that make the decision, not the chief medical officer of the insurer. And so we were denied. And then we went back. You have two grievance hearings. Went back at it again with a slightly different angle and some more ammunition, some more facts. We were denied. And the third step in the process, and I believe this is true in all states in the union, is a grievance hearing. And that is where you submit all of your paperwork, your support letters, research studies to an outside arbiter in an arbitration process. It costs you nothing. The insurance company pays for it. And the outside person actually does have experience, in this case, with neuroendocrine cancer. And he or she makes the final determination, which is binding on the part of the insurance company. I can tell you in our case, we filed over 50 pages of documents. I wrote letters for my wife's surgeon to sign on Mayo Clinic's letterhead, as well as her oncologist. What I did is I just wrote them. I sent them to their secretary, said, edit as you see fit. They sent them back to me. And so we used that as evidence why it was important to be seen at a specialty center.
Sure.
We also submitted studies. So 50 pages in total, roughly. The insurance company was 200 pages they submitted to the arbiter. And this literally is every phone conversation that you've ever had with your insurer. It's all recorded. It's all there verbatim. So the bottom line is we prevailed. The arbitration, the arbiter as it's called, he said that no, insurance company, you must allow them to go to Mayo Clinic for continuity of treatment on an in-network basis.
That's great. That's great. So how you said 90, however much, how often do you think net patients are getting denied, and what particular treatments and things are they getting denied for typically?
Well, I can't give you a percentage, but I've been following about 10 neuroendocrine sites for, let's say, 6 or 7 years, and I read many or most of the posts. And it seems to me that almost everyone somewhere along the line gets a denial from their insurer. Again, not really from Medicare, traditional Medicare, but from any private insurer or Medicare Advantage. I always tell people that are 64 and looking ahead to Medicare, and you have NETs, don't consider Medicare Advantage. Sounds cheaper. It sounds like you get more. But in the long run, it's going to cost you more, and it's going to be a lot of aggravation. And in a lot of cases, you can't go see a specialist. So let's see, where was I? So I think everyone somewhere along the line has a denial. I want to share with you just a few that I wrote down here from the various neuroendocrine sites, because it captures it and it gives everybody a sense for. A lot of people are going to say, oh, that's me. That's happened to me. So here's one. This is quote unquote. These insurance companies are pushing me over the edge. First, we get a bill for $145,000 and then a denial statement for my last 2 rounds of PRRT. We spent the entire week with $145,000 hanging over our heads. It wasn't until later it was finally approved. Now I get a bill for almost $10,000 for liver embolization with another statement saying my insurance is denying the payment. This is so overwhelming. Yeah. Here's another example. Anyone having trouble getting Blue Cross Blue Shield to pre-authorize a gallium scan? They're saying that pets are not approved for neuroendocrine. This is extremely frustrating, as this is the second denial. Any advice is appreciated. And one last one. It took me 4 months and a long, hard fight to get mine done, meaning my gallium scan. It took me 4 months. The insurance company made them do a couple CTs beforehand. So think of all that extra cost. It's really dumb.
Right. They're getting a scan, several scans that are not going to work, but they're paying for it instead of just paying for what's going to work.
Yep. Because the insurance company, I'm sure their rationale is CTs are cheaper and maybe that'll be just fine. But anybody that knows NETs knows the standard of care is a gallium scan. Not every time you get scanned, but there are certain times where it's necessary. So to me, the key point here is that the stress of neuroendocrine diagnosis puts each of us over the edge, and then having to deal with these denials and worrying about the care, especially when you don't understand the system and how to get your get what is coming to you is just extremely overwhelming. I think that's a good word, overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. What is their general excuse? Why do they oftentimes deny these treatments and these scans and stuff like that?
Well, there's 9 of them, and I'll just run down the list real quick and give a comment or two about each one. So number 1 at the top of the list is not network. Well, you and I just talked about that in my particular case. Or it's not standard of care, or it's not medically necessary. So one of the things that is important is to learn all the lingo, right? All the lingo. Number 3 is it's not best practice. Number 4 is, that's experimental. Number 5 is it's just too expensive. Number 6, it's not covered by your plan. Number 7, you may have had missing or incorrect information, and I'll share an example or two of that. Or insufficient detail. So it could be incorrect or insufficient. And then last is rules were not followed. And so let me just talk briefly about each one of those. I'm going to refer to some notes here. Not in network. That one is simple. You and I talked about it. So many regular plans, PPOs, HMOs, Medicare Advantage, they have these little narrow networks. And yes, they'll say, oh, well, we have specialists, meaning we have an oncologist, but they don't even know how to spell neuroendocrine. They've never seen a neuroendocrine patient.
Right.
So that is one that frequently needs to be overcome. The second is not standard of care, or it's not medically necessary. Your insurer may say that, well, seeing a NET specialist is not medically necessary because they have an oncologist on site. They may push back on a gallium scan, saying it's not standard of care. They want you to have a CT. We just talked about that. So again, they make money by limiting care, not providing extra care.
Right.
Number 3 is it's not best practice. They may push back on certain labs, saying they aren't best practice. This could include things like chromogranin, pancreastatin. It could even include a gallium scan or a copper scan, because those are expensive and they try to avoid them. Number 4 is experimental. This is a very common one, and they can use it for just about anything. There can be denials even when those treatments have been proven to be the best or only solution. And even if they're FDA approved, because what they'll say is, oh, well, yeah, it's FDA approved, but it's not FDA approved for this that you have to get done. So they'll sometimes work their way around that. It's too expensive. We talked about, let's say, a gallium scan. Well, why don't you just go get a CT? That's cheaper. It's not covered by your plan. Now, there's a lot of things like acupuncture, okay? It isn't covered by your plan. But most of the kind of standard things that NETs patients have done should and are covered by plans, by almost all plans. Yeah. Missing or incorrect medical coding, or sometimes called ICD. So these are the codes that are attached to every single procedure that you have.
right? And this is an actual, people go to college to learn the
Yes.
coding and stuff. This is an actual college course that you need to take to understand the coding for insurance companies. It's unbelievable.
I think the only thing more confusing than tax or than medical coding is preparing taxes. Okay.
Right.
So, but this could be as simple also, besides the coding, as let's say they list on a page T.E. Wilson, which is my name, but they're looking for Thomas E. Wilson. Okay. Whoop,
Right.
denied. I've clearly seen that happen. What's another one? There may be an incorrect tax ID number. Every doctor has a tax ID number. We were denied the payment for an assistant surgeon because of an incorrect tax ID number. Insufficient detail. So the insurer feels that you have insufficient detail to support medical necessity. They might ask for, and this happened to us, well, we need the doctor's NPI. Okay, first time I heard about NPI, which is National Provider Identifier. So every medical professional has one. It's kind of like our Social Security numbers.
Sure.
In fact, if you ask a doctor, they're like, I don't even know what mine is. But, I was able to look it up. Again, we talked about they deny a claim, then they delay it by asking for some of this information that is not really necessary. So the last one is the rules aren't the rules were not followed. You have signed up for a hard to get gallium scan. You're gonna drive 6 hours to whatever facility. You're waiting and waiting and waiting for the insurance company to provide approval, and it's not coming. Well, you got to get in your car, because if you don't do it now, it could be another 8 weeks. And so you have the procedure done, and they deny it because you did not follow the rules. It was not pre-approved, even though they sat on their hands. So those are what I would say would be the top 9.
Right. Now, when you get your denial, how would you explain to somebody how they approach overturning a denial?
Well, I mentioned this once, but I'm going to say this 3 times before we're done here. Obsessive brute persistence. You have to just keep on keeping on, and that doesn't mean being rude or obnoxious, but it means being assertive. It means being educated, so you know how to go about overturning a denial, which is the subject of this of our talk here today. Because the insurance companies do, in fact, they count on consumers or patients just saying, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the know-how. Oh, well, it's going to cost me $7,000. The other thing I would tell anybody, especially I'll call it a newbie, is keep incredibly detailed record of every encounter with every insurance company and medical professional. I would immediately start a Google Doc or a Word doc in chronological sequence, capture everybody's name, their title, their phone number, and keep that up to date. Mine for Lynn I think it's 180 pages at this point. So, and you want to use language. I'm going to give you a couple examples of language that could be used because it's very important.
Sure.
So this might be in a letter to an insurance company. There is no doctor at whatever the name of the insurer is who is considered to be a net specialist. There is evidence to suggest that patients with neuroendocrine cancer receiving care at high volume neuroendocrine centers of excellence have superior outcomes to those treated at centers with lower volumes of neuroendocrine tumors and with less experience. Another example would be outcomes are significantly better at high volume specialty centers. Moreover, mixing scans and labs between facilities can result in variations in technique or interpretation between different resources that may lead to inadvertent irregularities in proper clinical strategies. So what does that mean? You were mixing apples and oranges. I had a big conversation with the head of radiology at University of Wisconsin Medical School, and it was nice. It was just him and I for 45 minutes, and he did tell me. He said, "Yeah, if you can avoid that, not mixing apples and oranges, because you have the equipment that they're using, you have the radiologist who is interpreting the result, and then of course the oncologist. So consistency is pretty darn important." Now,
Sure.
those kind of comments, again, I prepared those and I've put those in letters and I've sent them to some of our net specialists and had them put them on their letterhead for their clinic to use in building a case to get denials reversed. Here's another one. And the other thing is I always recommend adding the words urgent expedited request. It's actually a legalese kind of word. And what it says is, by law, the insurance companies have to respond quickly. And I forget if it's 7 days or 14 days. But let's say it's the case where, my gosh, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting to get approval for this gallium scan, and now I got to be leaving home in 2 days. So you can send what I would tag as an urgent expedited request. This is an example of a letter that we prepared that came from my wife's surgeon to the insurance company. It said, "This letter of medical necessity is in regards to Lynn, who is diagnosed with neuroendocrine tumor. This is a rare cancer. Only a handful of centers in the U.S. have a large experience treating this type of cancer. I've been seeing her since, whatever date, shortly after her diagnosis. Since then, I performed 2 major open abdominal surgeries, yada, yada, yada. She's requesting to have her care continue at Mayo. We see 1,500 patients a year, so we have a big practice. We have a multidisciplinary team, and then we list all the different subspecialties. Outcomes are significantly better at a high-volume center." So that's that. Other words or phrases that you can consider using in a denial appeal would be, let's see here. You're requesting a gap exception, or clinical gap exception, where you request an out-of-network doctor to be included as in network because, quote, "no doctor in the network is qualified to offer curative treatment." Here's one of my favorites. Okay, so this would be in your letter to the insurance company, or it could be. "Due to the lack of experience and expertise, being encouraged to seek medical care at a facility or from a physician without the necessary medical expertise, tools, or training with nets is, quote, tantamount to malpractice."
The M word. That's definitely something that they don't like hearing. For sure.
I picked that gem up from Lori Todd, so that's not me. Another one from her was, "I require life-saving surgery." If you're trying to get surgery approved, "I require a life-saving surgery. The surgical procedures recommended are standard of care, medically necessary. No doctor with, Acme Healthcare has experience with neuroendocrine tumors. None are listed in the net expert databases." So I remember referring to carcinoid, their database, and the pushback was, "Wow, that's just a consumer database. That doesn't hold any water." They tried to discredit it. I got to tell you a funny story. When we lost our second grievance, our second appeal, I dug in and I found insurance companies will frequently use an outside doctor to provide guidance for denials or not. So in this case, they hired an oncologist. It's a retired guy. He's sitting at home. I found out that his due diligence was to look at University of Wisconsin's webpage about cancer, and he found that they have oncologists, and so his determination based on that due diligence was that that would be good enough. Well, I dug and dug and dug, and using Google, I somehow found his home phone number, believe it or not. I called him at home,
Wow.
and this guy flipped out because he couldn't even fathom how I found out who he was or how I got his phone number. And with HIPAA and everything, well, he
Right.
wouldn't even discuss it. He was just like fluxumed. He was, oh my God. But I brought that up in one of the grievance hearings that, this guy did no due diligence. So I
Right.
tried to discredit him.
Which is unfortunately what you have to do. It's just because there is an oncologist on site does not mean that they know what they're looking at when it comes to NETs.
Some other questions patients can ask is, why has this been denied? Because sometimes they'll just say your request for a CAT scan has been denied.
Right.
You want to know specifically, you can ask, but they're not legally responsible to tell you who denied my request and what are their medical credentials. Has Anthem or Humana or whoever the insurance company, have you ever denied this before for a patient with neuroendocrine cancer? Or conversely, have you ever approved this procedure, test, surgery for someone with, my case? So those are a couple different ways to slice the dice. You're not always going to get an answer that you like, but those are just some, different strategies that you can use.
Absolutely. They're really, really, really good. Very informative. So back to when you went to arbitration with your particular case with your wife. Why at the end do you think they overturned it?
First of all, this is the third time. Obsessive brute persistence. Again, we attended 2 grievance hearings and we filed for outside arbitration. By the time it was decided in our favor, that was 10 months, okay, of obsessive brute persistence. So I'm not saying each one is 10 months, and this was pretty simple. This was all we want to do is continue getting care from where we were getting care. And you know what the fact of the matter is? Mayo may or may not be a little bit more expensive. I tried to price compare between Mayo and University of Wisconsin healthcare, and it is virtually impossible to compare apples and apples in costs.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I tried. So we also used we presented fact-based case using the insurer's own policy language. You and I talked about knowing what kind of language they'll use against you, medically necessary and standard of care and all that kind of good stuff. We talked about discrediting the insurer's expert consultant that they were relying on. We obtained letters of medical necessity from 3 NETS experts, 2 from Mayo, 1 from New Orleans. We provided appropriate clinical studies, ones that are, really buttoned up clinical studies. We were straightforward. We were pleasant, not nice, but pleasant, but not antagonistic. And again, we prepared, 50 pages of documentation. So that's what it took.
It's very much due diligence on your part, and it's something that my mom brings up consistently at meetings and stuff like that. You have to be your own advocate. You have to. There's nobody else that's going to fight for you the way that you fight for you.
That's right.
And your loved ones. You were awesome enough to take this on head on. A lot of caregivers could just kind of go along with what's going to happen, but you were proactive and you took this on. You took the bull by the horns and helped along the way. That's amazing. It's a great story. Awesome
Well,
story.
like Liam Nielsen says in that I forget the name of the movie, but he's
Taken.
Taken.
Yep.
I have a certain set of skills that I've developed
Persistence.
and refined. I have helped quite a number of people who were flat out denied. They couldn't leave Wisconsin, and they wound up going down to New Orleans for surgery, to Iowa. So I'm always happy to help. Obviously, there's no fee. I'll help anybody that's willing to help themselves and to guide them. And so it makes me feel good, and it just is. It's so hard when somebody's initially diagnosed and they're overwhelmed with just the diagnosis to have to
Yeah.
deal with this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, at the beginning of the show, I did talk about the book that you and your wife
oh yeah,
co-wrote. Where can people find that?
notice how I don't have it right behind me facing you on a bookshelf like every speaker. Uh, I always tell people it's not a book that's going to keep you up at night, okay, because it's so enthralling. I'll give you 60 seconds on it. First of all, you can find it at Amazon. It's just search "Negotiate Anything" and Tom Wilson, because there's a couple books by a similar title. So "Negotiate Anything," Tom Wilson. Back in the 70s, my wife bought some video games for her brother, and when she bought them, she said, "Hey, if they want to return them, can they?" And he said, "Oh yeah, as long as it's not open and you have the receipt." Well, after Christmas, they went to return them because they got two of them, and the guy wouldn't let them do it, and that really ticked me off. So I resolved that ultimately, and that's a story in and of itself. But along the way, I kept examples of where companies where you didn't get your fair shake, and what we did to overcome it. And so I said, someday I've got this big thick file. We're going to write a book on this. So it literally became a 30-year longitudinal study of customer service in the U.S. and how consumers can, when they're coming up short with companies or insurance companies, furniture stores, doesn't matter, how they can stand up for their rights and what you have to do. So that's essentially the book.
That's excellent. That's great.
Yep.
That's awesome. And you are the leader of the Wisconsin Neuroendocrine Cancer Connection Group. Where can people find that and find you guys?
So our name on Facebook is Wisconsin Neuroendocrine Cancer Connection. We started out when we started 7 people. We now have 183. I figure there's about 3,200 neuroendocrine patients in the state of Wisconsin. So we have a long way to go. We have monthly meetings in the northeast part of the state, in Appleton, Wisconsin. Last night we had our first southern Wisconsin meeting, just south of Milwaukee. And the next step is to try to get one going in Madison. So those are the 3 main population centers within the state of Wisconsin.
That's great. Really, your story is inspiring. Your expertise is something that I really hope people take advantage of and listen to this, get the book, read it. Again, Lori Todd, the insurance warrior, is another huge resource
Yes.
to anybody facing these issues. You said it was your Bible, and
Yep.
we talked about this before we went live. She's tough. She is tough. She is assertive. That the brute force, if you will, is I've seen her present a few times, and it's like not somebody you want to mess with. So that's kind of but also at the same time, not confrontational.
No.
That's the other thing that I always find. Converse, don't confront.
Right.
And I feel like that's huge in this type of situation.
I was going to say, insurance companies don't outwardly try to break the law.
Right.
health insurers, but they use the system to the degree that they can to their advantage. And the disadvantage is consumers don't know how the system operates.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much
My
for joining
pleasure.
us today. This was, it was an episode that I was really looking forward to because, it's great having the doctors and stuff, but, having people who are dealing with this on the day to day, and their journeys. And, again, you're not necessarily a patient, but you are a
Right.
caregiver. And it takes a village to treat and create awareness and all that. So thank you very much, Tom,
It's true.
for joining us today. I do know that we have a slideshow on our
Yes.
website at
Yep.
netcancerawareness.org. So definitely take a look at the resources. He does have a slideshow up there. Take advantage of all this information that you got today. Once again, please remember to join us in Atlanta,
Yes.
November 10th through 12th. Go to your local chapter meetings. Go to the Wisconsin Neuroendocrine Cancer Connection Group meetings. It's super, super important. Keep yourself informed and
Yeah.
and realize that it's a great community. The net community is a community, like a real community. Check out some of our videos. I do know that they're on our YouTube channel. I do know that there are some Lori Todd presentations on there. I recorded them myself and edited them, so I know that they're there. And we look forward to maybe down the line having you back on.
Very good.
Again, everybody, if you like this type of programming, please follow us. Please like, subscribe, do all of the things on the social medias. Um, give us 5-star reviews on whatever platform you're listening to this on. It really does help, and it costs you nothing, and it helps us beat the algorithm, because that's unfortunately what we're stuck doing as well. Again, follow us on our social medias at NetCancerAware. Go to our website, netcancerawareness.org, for all information on our events. Again, Tom's presentation is also on there. And thank you once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.